Okay, this is the second part of the Senate Institutions Committee meeting on February 5th. And now we will be hearing from the Department of Fish and Wildlife with the interim commissioner or commissioner? Interim commissioner, Andrea Shortsleeve. And since you are new to us, we will introduce ourselves.
Senator Stickles. Senator Joe Major from Windsor.
Rob Luckett from the Bennington District.
Senator Sam Lewis from Orleans.
And I represent the Wyndham District. So we have a good geographic area. And the fish hatchery study report is something that this committee asked for last year because we had a lot of conversation about the Salisbury fish hatchery. It's historic, it's important, and it's some decisions need to be made at some point, but it is a really valuable resource. So
Great.
ready to hear more.
Well, yeah, thank you for having me. I guess for the record, I'm Andrea Shortsleeve, and I am the Commissioner for Fish and Wildlife Department. I've been a habitat biologist with the department for 8 years and interim commissioner for 2 months. So I'm still very much learning this role and learning more about our department. And so to help me today, I've brought Eric Palmer, who is our fish division director. And then we have Dylan Sickles, who is the program manager for our fish culture stations in the state. And then Charles Martin is our deputy secretary for the agency. And so if I can answer a question, I know these folks will be able to provide a lot of information as well. So, I guess you can move on to the next slide. There's just the introduction, and then we can move to the second slide. And knowing that there were a few new members of the committee here, I just wanted to start off with the mission of the Fish and Wildlife Department, and that's the conservation of all of our fish, wildlife, plant, and habitats in their habitats for the people of Vermont. And part of that mission is also to provide recreational opportunities, fish and wildlife-based recreation opportunities. And so it's a really big mission. We are very excited about it. We take it very seriously. I'm very lucky to have a large, passionate, well-informed, capable staff to help accomplish that. So move to the next slide. And I just wanted to give a little background information on the different fish culture stations we have in the state, different fish hatcheries. We have 5 of them, plus a fish health lab in Randolph. The Bennington Fish Hatchery or fish culture station is down obviously in the Bennington area, and it is the largest producer of fish out of our 5 stations. Next, we have Ed Weed, which is up in Grand Isle, and that's the newest fish hatchery that we have, and it is the second largest, that has the second largest production in the system. The Ed Weed facility only stocks Lake Champlain, and that's due to concerns over invasive species and fish diseases, because Lake Champlain is connected to the Great Lakes and now to the Hudson Bay, or Hudson River, excuse me. It is a vector for invasives and disease, and we don't want to transport those issues that are in the water in Lake Champlain to inland parts of our state. The Salisbury hatchery is the 3rd largest, and that's where our brood stock is grown. And so brood stock are the fish that are bred and raised to produce more fish. And that's where we have the largest fish being raised in our fish culture station. So if you want to go see a monster fish up close, go take a visit there. They're very cool.
Hold on just one second.
Do you prefer questions at the end or while you're doing the presentation?
I mean, I think it's a pretty small group, so we can do questions as we go.
Are there specific types of fish that you breed at certain times for the anglers are expecting when you go?
We do. I'll let Dylan answer this question.
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead.
Dylan Sickles, our fish culture operations manager of the state of Vermont. So, yes, our Salisbury facility does have a variety of fish that they spawn at different times of the year, depending on when we need those fish to be out available. One of the things I don't want to steal too much of Andrea's thunder here, but Commissioner Shortsleeve's thunder, excuse me, but we do have what we call a lighthouse on site. So we can actually manipulate the fish a little bit by changing the lighting structure there. It'll, the diurnal effect on that through the fish, we can get them to change up their time frame when they're actually spawning. So we can actually get some of the species to spawn by changing the light slowly over time. So they'll actually spawn earlier in the season rather than later. And so that matches up better with some of our other facilities that have a different growing period time frame to match up. So we can get those fish to those locations, such as our Bennington location and several others, where they get a few more months of growth on those before we stock them out later in the season. So
the only thing that I have an issue with is just make sure that the next time I go ice fishing,
Yeah.
that I catch something.
we're working on it.
Okay.
You gotta take it with you.
Glad to hear you're out.
Yeah, and the Bennington Fish
Went out
Hatchery.
on youth day.
That was the most, all these kids were walking past with fish, and I'm like,
Did you go to the pre-fishing festival?
He did.
Yeah.
I was there with my scavenger fish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in addition to those three, we have the Roxbury Hatchery and the Bald Hill Hatchery, which is up in the northeast part of the state. We at all the fish culture stations, they raise a total of 7 different species. That's brook trout, rainbow trout, brown trout, landlocked Atlantic salmon, steelhead trout, lake trout, and walleye. And we raise them for different reasons. One is for the restoration of wild populations, so that's mostly brook trout. But I was just talking to Eric the other day about the lake trout population in Lake Champlain, and this is going to be probably the last year that we're stocking those fish out of the Grand Isle Station, because now we found that they're naturally reproducing lake trout in the lake. So it's a good,
So it's good news.
great news. Yeah,
Good.
great news. But the majority of the fish that are raised in our facilities are to provide angling opportunities for people throughout Vermont. Next slide, thank you. And I just wanted to highlight the staff that work at our fish hatcheries, our fish culture stations. We have 21 full-time staff, and they're really not just fish culturists. Being at those stations requires them to be plumbers, electricians, mechanics, water chemists. They really have to run the whole facility, and they do a great job at all of those facilities. We have a lot of historic buildings and old pieces of infrastructure that they work really well at keeping running. They need to do stuff very quickly because, for example, Salisbury Fish Hatchery and Ed Weed are working on a pumping system, so the water is pumped up into the fish culture station. And if the pump goes out, the water won't flow through the station, and that it could be disastrous for the fish there. Our staff has been internationally recognized and respected. They're asked to put on workshops and trainings for other fish culture stations throughout the country and Canada. And Kevin Kelsey, who works in the Ed Weed station, has been asked to speak at conferences in Paris and other international venues. So we have a really intelligent, capable staff, which we're really happy about. They are maintaining stocking productions, they're maintaining the recommendations that we have put out in our fish plans, while not fully staffed. So we have a vacancy at the Salisbury Fish Hatchery right now, but the staff there are working full time to make sure that we are still meeting our stocking recommendations. And then just wanted to talk a little bit about the economics of everything. The annual operating budget for our fish culture stations is around 4.2 million. It'll be 4.6 million in FY26 in our annual budget. And that uses 1.65 million of federal dollars. And that there's also an addition of capital expenses that we use every year. And it ranges between $500,000 to 1.8 million. Just depending on the year, and the majority of those expenses go to the fish culture stations. The majority of the department capital funding goes to the fish culture stations, excuse me. But we know that these fish culture stations, these hatcheries, provide a really great opportunity. They provide access, they provide recreation, and a way that people can connect with nature and connect with being outdoors. And they do that through the million fish that are stocked every year. Angling in Vermont, angling in Vermont annually contributes to about $40 million to the economic situation here in Vermont every year. And that comes out to be about a 23-to-1 return on the state dollars that we invest into fish culture station. That's a huge boon to the Vermont economy, but unfortunately that money doesn't necessarily come back to the Fish and Wildlife budget. So great for the state, but we don't necessarily see those benefits within the department. And so that brings up the point about talking about our current funding model within the department. About a third of our budget is dependent on license sales and federal funds associated with those license sales. And we have been seeing a decreasing trend over the last several years, and all projections are showing that will continue to happen. This is a graph showing fishing license trends. Hunting licenses show the same trend, probably a little bit more exaggerated.
Excuse me, just,
Sure.
we don't have that in our packet and it's just kind of hard to see what.
Oh, that didn't come through. Okay, I can make sure that gets,
Or just if you just explain what the top line and then the dash line.
sure. So the dark blue, the top line are resident fishing licenses, and that just shows the, on the y-axis is the number of, licenses bought, or the dollars coming in, the revenue coming in, and then the x-axis is the years. And then the bottom line there, the lighter blue, is non-resident fishing. There's a dashed line at the top right-hand corner, and that just shows the reprint licenses that we have on for permanent licenses. So once you get to the 65, you get a permanent license. We do ask that people print them out every year so we can keep track of who's using them. But
Great, thank you.
yes, of course. And so every year the department is getting an increasing amount of general funds to help just close the gap in our general budget, which is great when we're in this situation, but it's not necessarily a good long-term option for funding the department that way. And this all kind of just culminates into a reflection that our historic model for funding our Fish and Wildlife Department is not really working anymore. Fewer and fewer licensed buyers are being required to cover more and more conservation work over the years. And I bring this up because when we look at the financial projections and the situation surrounding our fish culture stations, we can't do that in a vacuum. We have to really consider the budget for the entire department. Just move on to the next slide, and brings us to the report that we're going to talk about today. So the Act 162 legislative report asked the department to take a look at the feasibility of continuing operations at Salisbury, the feasibility of transferring production capacity to the other state hatcheries if Salisbury was closed. And I think it's worth mentioning that last year, Act 162 initially included an appropriation of $100,000 for the department to do this analysis, do this assessment. And unfortunately, that money just didn't make it through the finish line as the bill was voted on the general floor. So as a result, the department was left without resources to perform the detailed analysis. And this report is a reflection of the work of the staff. We did this on their time. So part of this report is looking at an infrastructure review of the fish hatcheries, of the fish culture stations. And as I mentioned before, our buildings are quite old. 3 of them are over 70 years old. Two of them are at least over 100 years old. So we have some pretty historic aging facilities that have considerable physical needs for maintenance and repair, some infrastructure needs as well. This includes degassing towers at the Salisbury Fish Hatchery, which would be put on the incoming wells to really help actually facilitate the production at that facility. And this just trying to drive home the point that we really need a full-on assessment, engineering assessment of what's needed at all these facilities, because they are quite complicated to really get a good detailed picture of funding that we need.
I'm sorry. the funding that do you have a ballpark, or would you need to do the assessment before you would come up with a number?
I don't wanna guess a ballpark because I've heard just a huge range of numbers. I don't know if anyone else has a ballpark of how much an infrastructure.
I can give
would need.
general ballpark. Again,
Okay.
Eric Palmer, I'm the Fish Division Director with Vermont Fish and Wildlife. We know a little bit because some states around us are in the process of rebuilding their fish hatcheries. New Hampshire is rebuilding what was formerly their outer mill fish hatchery, and I think they're looking at around $100 million for that facility to be rebuilt. Part of our challenge right now is we've got a couple different scenarios as to whether Salisbury stays open or it closes, and we try to move fish and where we move them. But we wanted to try and run those different scenarios through a consultant who specializes in building fish culture stations to try and get better estimates than our kind of, back of the napkin estimates. But building a new hatchery is quite expensive these days.
Yeah, I had no idea, so you're giving me a ballpark of just what a general helps me. So, thank you.
Thanks, sir. And so the staff also looked at what it would take to move production of our brood stock from Salisbury to the other stations throughout the state. Just starting with moving things to the Edweed facility because it is the newest facility. They started looking at that. But as I mentioned before, the water comes in and out of Lake Champlain, goes in and out of the station back to the lake. And there are significant biosecurity concerns with that facility if we were raising brood stock there and then moving them throughout the state. So there would be significant infrastructure upgrades regarding biosecurity to make that a possibility. I think from what I've heard that it's almost a non-starter based on how much that would cost. And then to look at look at transitioning the stock that is in Salisbury to the other 3 hatcheries. We know that the facilities would need to be updated to hold the brood stock because they are the bigger fish. They can be up to, I don't know, like this big. And there need to be significant upgrades at the other hatcheries to accommodate those fish. And what that would mean is that the capacity at those hatcheries would be less. We'd be stocking a fewer number of fish, less poundage of fish, and there would be a delay in production because we wouldn't, based on biosecurity concerns, we wouldn't be able to transfer the fish that are currently at Salisbury. We would have to start over at the new facilities. So it would be several years that the stock population would be significantly impacted. There'd be a delay in production. And what this all would mean is that there would be an overall decrease in operational costs at the hatcheries. We wouldn't see that right away because we'd have to build out a few of the structures. But each of those facilities would cost more than they do now. And then I just also want to reiterate that Salisbury is a historic building. It's on the historic register, so we would be required to maintain it, keep the lights on, keep the roof on, make sure it's operational for tours and just to keep that historic quality to the building. And then the final point made or addressed in the report was the question about whether or not Salisbury Fish Hatchery would be able to renew its discharge permit, which expires in December of 2027. And there are questions about whether or not we would be able to renew that. It's done through our sister Department of Environmental Conservation. And I think when we think about this, we have to understand that this regulatory challenge is only part of the big overall challenge of keeping Salisbury open and keeping our fish culture stations operational. The issue with this permit has been raised repeatedly with our DEC counterparts. I've spoken with their commissioner, and just trying to see if we can work together as sister agencies to figure out how we can either extend the permit, or work together so we can actually meet their requirements to get a new renewed permit. I do have to say that they are taking our concerns very seriously, as am I. There are additional water withdrawal reporting and permitting requirements that were put forth by Act 135, and that would impact, I think, both the Bennington and Bald Hill facilities throughout the future. So finally, the next steps for this, for what we're doing at the department, we're looking to conduct an infrastructure needs assessment on all of our department-owned lands and facilities. So that includes all of our fish culture stations, to really get a good idea of what is needed for infrastructure repair, maintenance costs. We will be completing a 5-year financial forecast and on our annual operating revenues and expenditures. And we will be completing a prioritization of our department programs that are existing and in the future, both funded and unfunded. And as we are doing that, we are reviewing other models, other financial models that have been successful in states across the country to support their conservation programs. So that's where we're at right now. Happy to have a discussion, take more questions, but I do want to extend the offer that if anyone wants to visit any of our fish hatcheries, be more than happy to accompany you. I know our staff would be happy to show you all around their facility.
Absolutely.
I would like to go see, yeah, Bald Hill.
Bald Hill, great,
Yeah, it's in my district. So.
excellent, okay,
Yes.
So no question about this.
I know.
And there's so many unanswered questions that never get answered.
Okay.
One of them, or it just seems like it just keeps on going and going and going, that no matter what happens, we just want to shut it down. And it just seems to be that way, that there's never any options as far as, okay, here's the options. If you guys could do this, we could do that. Or you could do this, you could do that. But it's always like, no, we're just going to shut it down. That's what we're going to do. And that's the frustrating part of it. I mean, there's fish cultures that are bought across all of the United States. We have one of the cleanest water sources in a very old building, but modern building, that I would think that we could probably sell enough fish stock to other states who want to buy it, and we could turn this into not a revenue sucking facility, but one that produces revenue. I know that we could probably do that. I'm probably going to introduce a bill to put a stamp on everybody's income tax, just like a duck stamp or a Peregrine Falcon stamp or whatever, and see if people at the end of the day want to do that. But it would just be nice to know what that number would be. We already know it's a 41 to $1 to $40 profit, as far as not profit, but that the revenue that's produced by fishing in the state of Vermont, it's there. And there, we're in government. We have a way to say, okay, well, listen, you're getting this benefit over here. We're going to take this money back and we're going to do it over there. We don't even talk about that. We don't even talk about cost sharing amongst the states or amongst the departments of any of that. We just are hell bent on just trying to close this down, and it never gets answered. And I just wish there was a way for me to find a compromise so that I could say, okay, to my folks, you know what? We're not going to lose any stocking capacity. We're not going to do that. The place is just too expensive to run, but we're going to make the difference up, and it's going to be over here. But here's the fear. As soon as we agree to that, then we move, then 2 years or 3 years later down the road, we haven't done it because it's too damn expensive to raise the fish. And so it's just the amount of trust that isn't there, that, okay, no, we're really going to do it. We really are going to raise these fish, and we're going to keep that stocking capacity up to where we can make sure that we're still doing the $40 million within the state in this industry. But it's just like, okay, as soon as we close this one down, we were just kidding. I mean, and I'm not being mean in that way, and I'm not. But I know how government works, and once you lose one facility, And we're gonna do something over here, but we don't really have a plan yet. We might do it, but oh, you know what? We decided 3 years down the road is too expensive. So that's just the conversation that seems to be going on. And there's never another solution. It's just, this is what we want to do. And if A&R thinks it's too expensive to do all this stuff, give it to a different department or let it stand on its own or do something. But I get it. You don't want to raise fish anymore. That seems to be what it is. Give us a different option. Give us the plan to move forward, to try to figure it out, but we don't even have that plan.
No, and I guess to respond, yes, I feel the frustration. I see it in the staff. It's not fair to them to be on the chopping block all the time. It's, I think, one of the reasons that it's difficult to find staff to come to Salisbury because they know that it's on the chopping block and it's not fair. I can't give you a number that we would need to continue operations right now. I think that's part of what this financial assessment would be looking at. Be happy to get back to you with a better number. But in regards to the possibility of selling stock to interstate, we'll send it to the director.
Again, Eric Palmer, Director of Fisheries. All of the states around us are currently raising fish to meet their needs. All of the other states also have rootstock. We're using a very similar model. It would be difficult for us to sell the fish we raise to other states for this type of stocking, because part of the challenge of fish stocking, as opposed to like sending fish to a grocery store or supermarket, is that you have to get the fish out at the right place in a very narrow window of time. And so we're scrambling as it is to get the fish that we raise out in the right spot, at the right size, at the right time of year. And if we were going to try and ship those, another 100, 200 miles as these yearling fish, that would be
Or have you come get
difficult.
them?
Well, we do-
ever send out a request for information to any other state saying, hey, if we got into fish raising, or conversations with your counterparts in other states and saying, hey, if we wanted to raise brook trout, would you buy them? I mean, I don't know if it's true or not, but I understand or been told that we are already raising Lakers and shipping them to Lake Michigan, or is that true? I mean, so are we raising Lakers to ship to other lakes already in the other part of the state? Okay, so I thought this was one of the first.
U.S.
things-
Fish and Wildlife Service is
Okay.
at the White River Fish Hatchery, which is located in Vermont, and they're using some of their capacity to grow lake trout for the Great Lakes.
Mhm.
But Vermont isn't shipping our lake trout. We've provided eggs
Mhm.
to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service over the years when they've had problems with their hatcheries, but we haven't provided, the stock fish, the yearling size fish to them. We do have some small commercial hatcheries in the state, and we provide eggs to them. They sometimes look around to other states to see if they can get a better deal or, the different species that they want. There are places, there's a place called Trout Lodge out west that raises eggs and sells them to a number of states. So there are markets available for that. We've looked into what it would cost us to, buy eggs if we weren't raising fish, but unfortunately we couldn't get them again at the right time, right strain, right size, right disease history. But as far as a commercial market to raise fish and sell them to other states, we could investigate it, but the other states right now are pretty self-sufficient.
Okay, and then I have a couple questions.
Yes.
So on page 9 of this report, which I'm presuming, so did your staff do this report?
Yes.
Okay, it was very helpful. So the bottom of page 9, so that it's important to note that if Salisbury FCS can be kept open and in its current configuration, this is the lowest cost option for maintaining production capacity. To me, that means it's the best option financially, right? And the quality is what you want.
Mhm.
So do you still agree with that? I guess.
I highlighted it, saying,
Yeah, well, it's an important, so is that the position? Or is that, I don't want to,
Is there another report? I didn't get it.
Well, this,
We've
it,
got that a long time.
Okay,
ago,
so
so
it's
it's waited for a while.
Yeah.
You want to-
Sure. So
I
part
mean,
of,
that's pretty compelling to me.
again, Eric Palmer.
Yeah. You're
Um,
still Eric.
I'm still Eric Palmer. I don't know if you'd like me to reintroduce
No, that's,
myself.
you're good now.
Okay. So part of what that sentence says is in its current configuration. Part of the challenge we have at Salisbury is we need to get a new NPDES discharge
Right.
permit. We need to meet Vermont water quality standards. We're not sure we can do that in its current configuration. Our last best estimate of what it would cost to significantly upgrade Salisbury was, I think, $14 million in 2013. And we weren't sure even then if we would meet the Vermont water quality standards for what they call the numeric criteria for
Right.
phosphorus. Our hope was if we did a number of other things that were less expensive, that we may be able to meet the other standard of the Vermont water quality standards, which is the aquatic biota, that we might see a positive response in aquatic biota. That's what our current discharge permit is testing, for lack of a better word, to see if over the next 5 years, the aquatic biota respond in a positive way. If they do, we can get another discharge permit. If they don't, the price tag to keep Salisbury in operations is unknown.
Okay, so then what I'm hearing is that you want to continue studying.
Mhm.
And it sounds like you plan to find a consultant for that. So do you have funding for that? Or are you asking for funding?
We are currently asking for funding. We have $185,000 coming as a one-time fund source to help start that initiative. And we'll be asking for more money for the rest of the assessment.
And would that be a 1-year plan or study, or how long would that take? Because I would think you'd want to tie it to your permit.
Right, yeah, that's a good question. I would say it would probably the study, I'm sure would take a while to complete. So I think it would have to be multiple year.
Okay, so that's part of your, is that in the governor's budget or? How's that?
I think the calculus was that would be included through Pay Act Senator, which is a little bit unusual, and I can have Steve Gomez, our CFO, kind of explain why that was the framework. But yeah, it's supported the administration.
Okay. Okay, so you have, the hatchery has a little bit more light.
Yes.
Did you have something?
Trying to remember where the $100,000 went to. Did we have that when we crossed the finish line in the capital bill?
It was not.
How'd that get away?
It must have been taken out after we were there.
Yeah.
There's stuff that happens after.
Yeah,
Mhm.
unfortunately.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I read the report last night over a delicious beverage. There's a lot of highlighting.
Yeah.
And really what I came down to, bottom line, is that if disagreeing with Senator Ingles, it doesn't seem that it's costing a lot of money to fund it. Seems like you guys are spending a lot of money to fund us, fund the state. What was it, 23-to-1 ratio return on investment? From a business perspective, that sounds like a pretty good deal.
Yes.
And why I think that we're not really, why it seems like what Senator Ingles was saying is we're funding you, it's because that money's not going back
Correct.
to you guys. So we don't have a tangible kind of cause and effect. Can you talk a little bit more about, because obviously there's a lot of economic impact that it brings to the state,
Mhm.
but can you talk a little bit more about like how much of that is attributed directly to Salisbury,
Ooh,
if you can?
I personally don't have the data to break it down straight to Salisbury. I don't even know. I don't know if that data is available. I'd be happy to look for it. Oh, well, we do have this pamphlet,
So asking shall receive.
but this isn't specific to Salisbury.
That's specific
Yeah.
to Vermont.
Commissioner, I could.
Please jump in. Thank you.
So,
Pass this. Take a look.
You got a couple.
so we can't necessarily break out hatchery by hatchery.
Yeah.
What the economic turn and return on investment, because of the way the hatcheries are interrelated. If we were going to do that anywhere, maybe we could do it at the Grand Isle hatchery, because that only stocks Lake Champlain. We know what the species are, how much angling pressure goes, you know. I think you have all sorts of current economic studies on, you know, what that means for rooms and meals and gas and meal, our restaurant. I'm being redundant. But Salisbury, again, they raise the fish to provide the eggs for the other 4 facilities. So what Salisbury contribution is really supporting the whole state program. Yeah. So it would be hard to say, oh, how much is that worth compared to, you know, the other 4 hatcheries.
I've gathered a lot though, since it supports all the rest of them. So,
Yeah, they all work together.
Do you have another question?
well, I mean, I spent a long time reading the report last night.
We appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, well, you know, it's very digestible to me. I come from, you know, my district is very agricultural, very fish and wildlife. So it's very digestible for me. And I worry about the impact that closing Salisbury would have on the fish population across the state, because people aren't going to stop fishing. People are going to continue to fish, and it will probably do a lot of damage against the fish population. So without Salisbury supplying all the other hatcheries, I worry about that.
Okay, so the report will help with that. Yes, go ahead.
And I guess, to piggyback on Senator Douglas's, comment. What did, and I'm just asking you to speculate, so that's what we're here for, to try to do our best Kreskin. How much of an effect will closing that one have on the other hatcheries? If it's feeding, it would seem significant. And so you know, I know we're looking at it, but it almost seems as if it's almost a non-starter because we feed into this revenue. Is that accurate or?
And it's also probably important to say that we don't have a plan to close Salisbury.
Okay.
I know that this has come up in the past and it's been contemplated, but the agency is not contemplating that until we can get the results of the study. And we want this to be an objective process, just hearing all the input that we've had here today. By the way, Charles Martin, Deputy Secretary for the But I really do appreciate the tie to tourism. I think that's something that's been grossly under acknowledged for the Fish and Wildlife budget. And I have had kind of preliminary conversations around the building about creative mechanisms that could acknowledge that from a financial standpoint to try to get at some of the declining license sale impacts that Andrea acknowledged. So I'm happy that there's a few like-minded people in the building who are also seeing that, because I think it's been underemphasized.
Okay, go ahead.
I just need somewhere to go with it. This is the plan. I gotta sell to somebody. And as of right now, I'm just not getting enough information to even be other than just like absolutely positively no. I just need more information as far as to, you know, what the plan is. And I mean, it just doesn't seem like there's a plan other than we're not making money. That's it. See ya. And I want to be reasonable.
Yeah, I'm sorry that that's the impression that you're getting, that we're saying no, because we're absolutely not. As Charles just mentioned, we don't have plans to close Salisbury. We do need to take an objective look at all of our facilities and our wide budget, but our plan is not to close it right now.
And let me just say again, they said in the study that it's the lowest cost option for producing the stock.
Yes.
So the lowest cost option.
So I think also it was the lowest cost option rather than replacing and getting a whole brand new facility, which I think was 100 million. Did I read that? Yeah, 100 million for a brand new facility. And then it was going to be several million to rebuild up the facility.
Right.
So I think that it's definitely the lowest cost option to keep it in its current configuration and where it is right now. Yeah, I completely agree. You know, and another very, very kind of a minor point is most summers I spend a good amount of time fishing, and that's how I filled my freezer for wintertime. So there is at least some aspect of a food security thing. You know, my family doesn't have a lot of money. My wife and I are a little strapped. So it's been very helpful to be able to go out with a pole, spend $40 at Walmart, and be able to fill my freezer for winter. So
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Are we all good? Okay.
I'm good.
All right. Well, this is better news than we had last year. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us in, and please feel free to reach out if you have any follow-up questions. Happy to come back with other information.
And it would be great if you come back later in the session so that we understand what's happening.
Okay, great.
Also, at least and it seems like Senator Douglas will reach out and tour.
Please
as
do,
well.
yeah.
So I can know what the heck I'm talking about.
Great.
And thank you again, for the ice fishing event. It was, everyone was just so friendly, and it seemed like everyone was, really having a good time.
Thank you.
Yeah, for someone who's never done it before. I'm from Gulf, for God's sake.
Yeah, the number of people that were like, this is their first time out on the ice, just like standing in front
Yeah,
of the
that was
water.
a bit distressing as well.
Just wait till you drive a truck on it.
That will not happen.
That's no moment.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you all.
I could mention just at a passing point that we do have another one of those coming up in June. It'll be the free fishing festival that's at the Ed Weed facility, every summer.
I was gonna say,
There's
there's
no,
no,
there's won't be ice fishing.
Yeah.
Climate change.
But, with the staff
They're gonna-
there.
They're gonna actually let Senator Major fish right in the hatchery.
Absolutely.
Maybe he'll catch something.
We actually do fish at the hatchery, so they have trout.
Like this
Balls,
ball, fish in the barrel.
and almost, we had tons of kids come through. It's an amazing event. We've had a lot of great fun with that, so,
Well, let us know. Yeah.
Yes.
I believe it's second Saturday in June, is that how it is, everyone? So second Saturday in June at the Ed Weed facility up in Grand Island, so it'll be going on.
Cool.
Yes.
Please come out. Thank you. To reiterate, don't hesitate to give us a holler for visits. We'll be happy to do something.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, yes, thank you.
You too.
Thanks.
We won't put us online,
Sure.
so I don't think that's sending you a copy.
Sure.
He's like, yeah,
Okay,
So-
so I think,
Well, just a little
Go ahead.
more while we're talking
yeah,
about
hold
it.
on.
I don't understand it all. I just can't wrap my head around it. So they're talking about closing it, but then they're not talking about closing it. And they're talking about they can't move it, they can't do it, they can't do the permit, but we have no plans to close it.
Well, it sounded
Right.
like they needed to do the study the study that they had. They didn't have any money to use. They didn't do that if they could. And they needed the money that was taken out from last year to do it.
which was actually in the report.
Yeah.
How much was
It was 100 million, yeah.
100,000
Well, 100,000 for the study.
for the study.
Oh,
100
okay.
million.
Yeah,
for
sorry,
the
yeah.
study.
Initially included an appropriation of 100,000, funding for the legal department,
Yeah.
other resources before the analysis.
But what I heard Charles saying is that it's in the budget, but it's gonna get paid for some reason.
Right.
So they're gonna have the money to be able to actually, I guess, hire the people that will give the actual numbers and give an actual plan. Rather than what they have, which is, we can't figure out how much it's gonna cost because we don't have.
And I've been
But actually,
looking.
their study was good. It was pretty
Right.
solid.
And I'm
Sure.
not trying to be
Yeah.
unreasonable
Yeah.
with them. I just, give me a compromise of something. And I just can't, it just seems
Yeah.
to be like this is just one of these things that keep on going around and around and around. And every time it goes around, I miss the point.
I
And it
think,
keeps on spinning.
I think this is the compromise and they're trying to find a way to remain viable and, get their new.
But I also
That's
just
what they're doing.
believe that A&R says, this isn't our model. This isn't how we make money. We don't know how to make money. We don't know how to make money in this. And it's like when, in real estate, there are some people that can invest in apartments and know how to make money with it, and they do well. And there's other people that lose their butts on it.
Yeah.
Or I can remember as far as in business, I like to think I'm probably pretty good at business, but there's one business I'm not good at, and that was in the restaurant business. And I couldn't figure out how to make money in that business, but it always seems like in this one right here, okay, here's our model. Oh, and yeah, down here we have this little thing that we can't do well with. And so let's just get rid of it.
But
That just seems to be where it's going.
all right, well,
Or
so
I'm missing the point, Chair.
I think it's good that you're being alert to this and you're staying alert to this. Because last year, that was a possibility and the administration was actively planning to to close it.
Right.
What I'm hearing is that they're not planning that anymore.
Well, but
So
then,
we just need to
but
keep,
why are we, you keep on having the conversation about Salisbury and they're trying to go against what you and I did last year, which to be fair to everybody here, the bill that we did last year was, hey, the permit runs out in 3 years. Here's what you do. Each year, give us a report. But your plan is during those 3 years is to move production someplace else so we don't lose production of fish being put into our river systems and lake systems. And you have 3 years to do that. And with the full understanding that at the end of 3 years, we were going to say, okay, now you can close
well,
Salisbury.
except my understanding was you have 3 years and maybe we can modify something so that you can
Exactly.
get a permit
Ex-
and keep Salisbury.
Exactly. But at the
That
end
was
of
one
the
of the
day, in
options.
my, yes,
Yeah,
at the end of the day, in my brain, I was like, okay, as long as you can assure me that we're not gonna lose production anywhere, and that's the facility that isn't working for you, but you can move it someplace else, I'm good with that. But yet it seems to be reneging on that.
well, I think they can't do it the same way because of the water quality and because of the restrictions on the kinds of fish that can go into Lake Champlain.
And here's another thing that that nobody's being aware of. This water source that's coming and this brook that they're talking about, the only water source that runs this brook is being pulled out of some of the purest springs in the state of Vermont that feed this plant. And that is the water that runs out of it. Other than that, that's it. I mean, so it isn't like, oh, they're polluting the brook. I mean, that,
And they don't know if they'll get the permit.
right.
Right.
That's sort of a.
But there are
Well, we
many
control that a
things.
little bit too.
Yeah, so let's go see it. Let's have that. I mean, that's on my list for field trips.
Yeah.
But I think winter isn't the best time. We need
Right,
to wait a couple months before going.
So that's where it is. Show me almost a plan that Senator and I put together last year and show us the plan.
Yeah, well, this report is part of that.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So, and this report says that this is the least cost way of doing what they're doing. And it's sounds like it's a great facility.
Mhm.
And so it can be, hopefully they can find a way to make the permit work. All right,
Okay.
is that good for now?
Yep.
Are we,
I'm good, yes.
okay, all right, so we already